couple of days ago, Mike Morrell, who was actually, I think he went on to become the CIA director, was on Chris Matthews' show. He's on Hardball on MSNBC. And he has a new book out on the Iraq War. And among his many other positions in the CIA, he was actually George W. Bush's intelligence briefer. So he was the guy who the CIA would send over to the White House to brief the president, President Bush, on WMD programs, the Iraq intelligence, and everything else. He was on Chris Matthews' show talking about that. And look, Chris Matthews does a really, really good job here with two things. First, if you look at what Mike Morrell's book says, he basically does state pretty directly that, of course, Bush and Cheney hyped intelligence in the interests of invading Iraq. But the other thing that's happening in this interview that Matthews is noting is that Morrell doesn't really want to get into the motives or why Bush and Cheney lied, or even really acknowledge that they did lie, even though he essentially writes that they lied in his book. And the reason it matters, as Matthews points out really well in this clip, is because the rewriting of history that's happening right now is just basically that, look, I mean, like Jeb said the other day, my brother was the victim of faulty intelligence. This was just a matter of not getting the intelligence right. And that's why we engaged in this absolutely massive debacle. And not what it really was, which was there was a preordained policy drive. They wanted to invade Iraq regardless. WMDs was going to be the main selling point because people were freaked out. And they hyped intelligence and distorted intelligence consistently. Let's listen to Chris Matthews talk with Mike Morrell, and then I'll break it down a little bit more.
He has, in fact, reconstituted nuclear weapons. Was that true or not?
So we were saying...
Was that true?
We were saying...
Can you answer that question?
No,
was that true?
That's not true.
Well, why'd you let him get away with it?
Look, my job, Chris, is
You're the briefer of the president on intelligence. You're the top person to go in and tell him what's going on. You see Cheney make this charge. He's got a nuclear bomb. And then they make subsequent charges. He knew how to deliver it. He had the capability to deliver it. And nobody raised their hand and said, no, that's not what we told him.
Chris, what's my job, right? My job...
Tell the truth.
My job, no, as the briefer,
Okay, go ahead.
As the briefer, my job is to carry CIA's best information and best analysis to the President of the United States, make sure he understands it, right? My job is to not watch what they're saying on TV and say, yesterday...
You think TV's a joke?
What?
You think it's a joke that Cheney said on TV?
That's not my job.
Did you know he did that?
No, I wasn't paying attention. I was studying what was on my desk every morning.
So you're briefing the president on the reasons for war. They're selling the war, using your stuff, saying that you made that case when you didn't. So they're using your credibility to make the case for war dishonestly, as you just admitted.
Look, I'm just telling you...
Well, you just admitted it.
I'm just telling you what
they gave a false
Chris,
presentation of what you said to them.
On some aspects.
He had a nuclear weapon.
I'm telling you
That's
what
a big deal.
Chris, I'm telling you what we said.
Do you agree? It's a big deal. They claimed they had a weapon when you know they didn't.
It's
you had no evidence.
Yeah. It's a big
Susan, your thoughts about
well,
this?
Well, here's the other thing in Mike Morrell's book that I think is relevant to this, and that was a case where the vice president and his top aide, Scooter Libby, clearly was trying to distort the intelligence to make the case for war. And that was on the question of whether Iraq had a role with al-Qaeda before 9/11.
The Prague meeting, so-called.
That's right. And it was clear that the CIA concluded there was no connection, zero
Why
connection.
Why did Cheney say there was a connection with 9/11?
And the vice president continued to make the case that there was.
You're asking the wrong guy why he said it.
I'm asking the right guy. Because we weren't there and you were.
I don't know why he said it. You need to ask him.
Well, you don't think is this too hard to deduce? He did this to get us into a war.
Chris, the only thing I can tell you is what we were telling the administration.
Okay, in your book, let's go back to your book, because I want to quote you. There were senior administration officials, most significantly the vice president, who continued to imply that there was a current connection between Iraq and al-Qaeda. This was inconsistent with the analysis, but the implications continued, all to the detriment of the American people's understanding of the truth. You're doing a good job here. And of Dick Cheney's chief of staff, Scooter Libby, you wrote that, quote, Libby's attempt to intimidate a top CIA official was the most blatant attempt to politicize intelligence that I saw in 33 years in the business, and it would not be the last attempt by Libby to do so.
Okay, so there you have it. This is fascinating on so many levels. So, because first you have Mike Morrell exemplifying the bureaucratic and weaselly mentality that you see all too often in D.C., in government, in corporations, in the intelligence services, because he's saying in real time, I'm briefing the president. Then people from the administration are going out on TV and saying things that are not true. But I couldn't comment on that because I wasn't paying attention to that. Because my job isn't actually to look at what they're doing with this intelligence I'm presenting. It's just to present it. And then you go to the book, and he actually hits Scooter Libby pretty hard, but for some reason won't say it unequivocally on television. And the other important part about this clip is look, I think most people remember Condoleezza Rice, we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. Dick Cheney going out in September 2002 and saying there's very clear evidence that Saddam was developing nuclear weapons. Iraq's acquisition of aluminum tubes are being used to enrich nuclear weapons. The Niger claim that was debunked by Joe Wilson, and then, of course, the administration tried to smear him and Valerie Plame. That led to criminal consequences for Scooter Libby. All of these issues, people within inside the administration trying to smear Wilson and Plame. But the really astonishing thing, and people don't even talk about this anymore because, it's so much is focused on the false WMD claims, and then the people like Jeb who are trying to rewrite history and say, well, everybody got it wrong. Well, do we remember the claims about the Prague meeting? They mentioned that. You had administration officials, including Dick Cheney, repeatedly referring to a meeting in Prague that took place between an Iraqi intelligence officer and Mohammed Atta, who, of course, was the ringleader and on the planes in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The direct claim that Iraq was collaborating with al-Qaeda, which defied every type of logic, political reasoning about the region, political rivalries. There was no reason to think that Saddam Hussein, who had certainly bankrolled and backed many more secularly oriented terrorists, would ever back al-Qaeda. And there was just no real evidence for it. And it was consistently claimed. So we're getting to a point in the rewriting where now people like Jeb are saying, and Marco Rubio is saying, well, he made the right decision based off of the intelligence we had. Everybody was wrong about the WMD. That's why this catastrophe took place. Wrong. They hyped and lied about the WMD, and that's why this catastrophe took place. And we're not even discussing the even more glaring and mind-blowing lie, which was that somehow the Iraqi intelligence services were connected to Mohammed Atta. And I just want to say, it's a brief footnote here. When they say that everybody got the intelligence wrong, well, there were UN inspectors on the ground. There were people from the IAEA, people who were totally smeared by the right at that time, people like Hans Blix and Mohammed al-Baradei, certainly did not see unequivocal evidence that Saddam had some type of dangerous global reach WMD program. Intelligence that was getting released from the UK was getting sort of questioned and debunked in real time. Robin Cook, who used to be a member of Tony Blair's cabinet, was a foreign minister at the time before the invasion, was in another position. He resigned from cabinet over the invasion, and I recall him saying that you might find trace materials and small amounts, but this certainly is not a global threat and a global danger. So a British cabinet minister seemed to somehow know the real nature of the WMD program. The Germans told us about, that character, I think, curveball that we were relying on wasn't credible. The French didn't buy it. And now we're being sold the follow-up lie. And Chris Matthews did a great job of not only debunking it, but reminding of everybody of why it was important. And Mike Morrell exemplified bureaucratic back covering, essentially. Unbelievable.